And we are on the air again. Good morning, Europe. Good afternoon, Europe, and welcome to this third keynote of the session blog, The Future of Education. We have with us a key guest for the European higher education environment, but also for our organization. Alfredo Soeiro is some sort of a superman in the field of education. He has been founder of 3 European and global networks. He has been the president of the International Association of Continuing Engineering Education and the president of our partner CEFI, the European Society for Engineering Education. Among other responsibilities, Alfredo is now in the executive board of EDEN, the European Distance and E-Learning Network. Alfredo is one of the reasons why educational involvement exists in BEST. He has been with organizations since the beginning of the education service. He is currently part of our advisory board. Today, Alfredo is going to share with us some insights about online assessment. As you probably know, during the pandemic, many of our professors have struggled to evaluate the learning outcomes of their students. In general, assessment is a challenging task, so imagine doing that on remote. Alfredo will talk us today about online assessment. He will share some examples of current methods and frameworks, and he will forecast a bit, in the end, some insights about the future of assessment in higher education. Said so, welcome Alfredo Soeiro. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I've been working with BEST for a long time, so it's always a pleasure to cooperate. And I'm very happy that you address these questions and these different times that we are living. I also appreciated your introduction, especially I have a new adjective that I didn't have. So I'll add it to my curriculum, Superman. So I'll try that one. It's a very good one. Okay, very nice, very good. We're going to talk about online assessment. It's something that it's very important for everyone. And let's start first with the definition of assessment, which I think that let me see if this works. I'm trying to progress, but for some reason it's not working. Oh, okay, here we go. This is the summary of the presentation. I'll talk a little bit about assessment, then I'll talk about what happens online. I'll give you some examples, some of them very recent from these 2-3 months that have passed, and some ideas about what I think will be the future of online assessment and assessment in general. There are many people that say that dividing online and face-to-face probably doesn't make sense because they are so intertwined that things are becoming not specific, but they are, let's say, mingled and intertwined, so it doesn't make sense. So, but anyway, I'll follow this path. So assess comes from a Latin word, assidere, that means to sit with. I'm a little bit old, so I've been here for some years, and my impression of the assessment is that it is in fact sitting with the student to know what he knows, not what he doesn't know, but what he knows. And you have really to have this dialogue and have this exchange to know what competences, what does this student has apprehended, has learned when he went through the course or the workshop or the seminar, whatever. But it is, in fact, something that needs two people. And mostly the assessment we have is generally given to the student. He has to respond to the exam, and there's no dialogue. So I think that it's very convenient that that there is more communication, and I'll talk about that in the end of the presentation. Okay, so what is at stake when we're talking about online? Of course, the student, this is a part of the interaction between student and teacher and society, of course. that has these three dimensions from my point of view. The student wants to pass, wants to have success, wants uh, to 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 continue his studies, so they don't want to repeat the studies. The teacher, on the other hand, wants to verify that there is compliance with the minimum required, so that he can be happy that the students have learned something. And of course, society, when I talk about society, you have professional organizations like FEANI or the EURACE Association, the ABET, the society in general. They want to be sure that the people with a diploma, an engineering diploma, uh, has some competences, has some knowledge, has some skills, and has some attitudes. So I think this is what is at stake when we are talking about the online assessment. And you have to take this into perspective whenever you look at assessment. It's not just you that wants the success, but it's the teacher who wants to be comfortable with the acquisition of competences by the student, and it's the responsibility also to society to ensure that you won't make mistakes or big mistakes. Mistakes you'll probably do, but not big mistakes that will compromise safety and sustainability and other important things that you learn during your course. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to talk about is a project that I coordinated some years ago, which was precisely how to assess learning outcomes, how to assess competences. This is a project that is one of the most interesting where I've been involved, not because I was a coordinator. It was because what we did. It was very interesting. And what did we try to do? This is what we tried to do. For each type of learning outcome, you need the right assessment, because you cannot assess skills the same way you assess knowledge or you assess attitudes. So you need proper assessment methods for the different type of competences. And what we have in most of the courses, and you are students, you probably are agreeing with me, you probably have written exams that most of the times, for instance, cannot assess your attitude. You may be a great engineer, always with the attitude of solving problems, and it's not easy to find that with written assessment. So this question of aligning the type of learning outcomes and the type of assessment is crucial. So do you think this is a simple problem? Not really. It's really a very difficult problem. Even for the professors, it's very difficult. We have, on this project, we have created a web tool that it's public. Anyone can use it. You can use it if you want to check if your professor is assessing you the right way, or if you want to propose an assessment method to your professor, you can take a look. But these are the dimensions of if you know the Bloom taxonomy. These are the 6 dimensions of the Bloom taxonomy that imply different types of learning outcomes, different types of competences. And for each one of these 6, there are, what the program does, the web tool does, is propose at least 3 methods of assessment. Few of them are, let's say, used because most of the times what professors use, as you know, is written multiple choice, open answers, etc. But there are many other ways of assessing what the student does and knows. So we applied this tool, for instance, in CALOHEE. CALOHEE was a project where BEST was a partner, and not initial partner, but became involved afterwards. And this CALOHEE is comparing achievement of learning outcomes in higher education in Europe. And one of the topics was engineering, civil engineering. I was one of the coordinators, so I know a little bit of what happened. And as you can see, you have here the learning outcomes that are expected for engineers in the dimension 1. which is knowledge and understanding. There are 9 dimensions. And for each one of these competencies, as you can see in the bottom, the assessment approaches were proposed, from problem solving to practical work, to essays, to multiple choice questions, etc. So, and the professor can choose, you see, because this is derived, like I said, from the theory of Bloom and Anderson and all that uses strong verb. I mean, it's complicated to explain, but if you are interested, I can explain. But the tool solves that complexity while proposing these tools. And that's what we use in CALOHEE. By the way, CALOHEE as a continuation, it will be CALOHEE 2, and I hope that PEST will be involved again. Another example that I wanted to show you is the e-portfolios. I've been working in the last years also with e-portfolios. E-portfolios is an excellent tool. It's, how do I say, changing the assessment to improve learning. And how do you do that? What do I do with my students? They make an e-portfolio every week, and they reflect on what learning outcomes they had on the discipline. And we discuss that. And while discussing that, not only I can see what each student needs, but also if the purpose of the assessment is being obtained, because the student has to show evidences of the learning outcomes they have achieved. So there are many people working in this area, and I think this is the future, especially on the online, because this works very well online, because you put this online, you have then Zoom sessions to discuss with each student, and you can discuss, you can exchange emails, you can place forums, etc. It's very useful for online example. One of the examples I have here is from Berkeley, but there are many others. I mean, there is, I can show you in Eden lots of examples of people that are using e-portfolios. By the way, e-portfolios are used in the profession, especially in the medical and in some engineering, in Engineers Island and others that use the e-portfolio to evaluate the competencies acquired, not on the universities for the Engineers Island, but for what we call continuing professional development, so the learning in the profession. And those things are being used. So that's also something that can be used, and I'm particularly interested in having this tool developed more. Okay, another example. You have here, there are many webinars recorded on the web, and you can see, but the ones that I suggest, not because I'm from Eden, but because I know the quality of what's been there, and I think this session that it's here, it's very good. You can see what's in there. For instance, one of the ladies, she was from IBM, I guess. She evaluates the competencies of the engineers in IBM with open books, with open exams, with open tests and work. So, and personally, I don't see why we have to use closed book exams. So this question of having someone watching you when you're doing this exam online, I think it's ridiculous, because in the profession, you don't do that. You use your, and my exams are on Moodle, they are all open source, open books, so they can consult the sources, etc. So, but this is something that you should watch. This is a very good webinar. And I'm having this text here because I cannot connect with Zoom to the site. So that's why I have here the text. Whoops, sorry. Another one that I think probably you'll have to face in the future. This is an example from China, but there are other examples. For instance, the first time I've seen this was in Lausanne. Professor Pierre Dillenbourg, I don't know if any Swiss is attending, but he works in the Rolex building, which is one of the best buildings I've seen in a university. But what he did at that time was precisely doing this with students. You can use facial recognition to detect emotion. So you know if the student is, each student, and this is being done in China in high school, 3 years ago. So it's already there and it's being used. And like I said, the first time I've seen it was in Lausanne, in Switzerland, and you can detect what is the understanding of learning. You do that, I do that with my experience. I can have a feeling of knowing, looking at the face and the eyes of the student. I can do that, but this is being done on the computer. So it's for all students. So all students are being analyzed, and those that need help, they will be helped and identified and helped. So this is also something that can happen in the future. Another dimension that can happen in the future for those who are in informatics is the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. This is being done in Stanford. This is not, how do I say, science fiction. It's already being done. So artificial intelligence is doing the assessment online. The students present their essays, their exams, and from the rules that the professor uses to grade, the machines are doing it for the professor. It's I hope it works, because it's a lot of work to grade exams, etc. For us, it will be very good if this works, and with something that I think it's very important, which is justice, because it's very difficult to keep the same standards when you are grading exams, believe me. So machines will do it better than professors. And finally, this is my final slide. This is what I think that online can help the assessment. It's the data. We can have lots of data about the students. For instance, I know what students have been assessing my Moodle course, how many documents they have seen, etc. And also the communication. I can have a Zoom with any student anytime both of us want to talk. And that's very good. And like I said, the combination of this data and the communication, that it's now universal, accessible. You can have easy dialogue. You have information. And most of it, I think, and I come back to my first slide, is to sit with the student, because assessment should be personal. I don't think one size fits all. And the assessment should be really personal and more, let's say, interact with more interaction between teacher and students. And I think the online techniques and tools favor this type of approach. So thank you very much. I don't have any networks except LinkedIn and Twitter. So if you want to contact me, that's where I am. You have my email, and I think we have some time for questions. I'm sorry, but I got a little bit enthusiastic about this and I talked too much.
Okay, you're right, Alfredo. Thank you very much for the talk. What can I ask you? Okay, perfect. Amazing. Yes, actually, we have a little bit of time for some questions that some people post in both prior and during the streaming. You have covered most of the topics, and I think most of the students will be really happy to have a more personalized assessment and more interaction with the teacher instead of like maybe feeling like a number, because I guess that's something we do feel sometimes at the university.
You're not a number. One of the things I've learned as a teacher, the student is not a number, it's a person.
Definitely. Okay, so here's the first question for you. You have talked to us like about different super interesting projects. And the question is, how do you think this project will affect education after the pandemic?
You mean the CALOHEE 2, for instance?
Yes,
yeah.
For example.
The CALOHEE 2, precisely, our first phase was to consider what were because we have already the framework, the competencies. And the first phase of the project, what we have done was to take a look precisely at the consequences of the pandemic and the need probably to work more online. So what we have developed, and we are discussing that right now, and I probably best should be a partner in that discussion, is which competencies the students should have to participate on this online learning and online assessment. And we have a list already of proposals. I don't know if you know, but there is a digital competence framework that has been created by the European Commission, but that is more on the side of, how do I say, using the digital tools. And that's not what we're looking at. What we're looking at is at the process of teaching and learning, including the assessment, of course. So, and those digital competences are not in the digital competence framework of the European Commission. So that's how I think it can affect.
Okay, perfect. Super interesting, and of course, we will very love to be contributed to that discussion. We have another question for you.
Yep.
It's basically okay. Imagine let's try to do a little bit of forecast in 10 years from now on how will assessment would look like.
Like I said, it will be individualized. We will have machine learning and artificial intelligence involved. We will have and we will have more communication with we'll probably have avatars talking with you instead of the professor. But one of the things that I think it's relevant is that you will have probably the ability to choose your assessment method instead of being the professor. One of the things I noticed in CALOHEE is that I didn't know, I was not aware because I don't think I'm like that, but most of the professors in the room, and believe me, there were difficult fights and discussions. Most of the professors consider the assessment as very personal. They are very personal about the assessments. They are the only ones that know how to assess the students. They are the only ones that supposed to make the assessment. They don't allow other professors to get involved in their assessments, and I think it's wrong. But and that's dangerous because the professor knows a little bit, and you need to have other ideas and other inputs to make your assessment. So it is something that will change, I'm sure, because probably you will have professors that will be trained on assessment. I had some sessions in my university provided by the university trying to give more training to assessment, because mostly the professors do what I did when I started. You did the assessment the same way you were assessed when you were a student. But things have changed. Things have changed because you can do, for instance, one of the things that will happen, and I forgot to mention that. One of the things, and I'm working on a project on safety that uses this technique, is simulation. I think we'll have a lot of simulation. Lots of medical schools are already assessing students with simulation. They present you a scenario with a patient about whatever, but it's simulation. I think simulation will be probably the change, the major change in the assessment of students besides what I said, because you can create simulated scenarios where you can test the competencies of the students. For instance, we are training on this safety project, and we are using virtual reality and immersive reality to train people and, if possible, certify them, because it's a professional project. It's not an academic project. So it involves certification of people that will be on the construction site with responsibilities in terms of safety.
Okay, Alfredo, that is really interesting. I'm pretty sure like all our audience will be like excited about how assessment would look like in the future, probably way different than just a paper on your table. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. So with this question, we're gonna conclude this super interesting keynote about online assessment. So the organizing team and I would like to thank you, Alfredo, for being with us today and sharing your ideas, knowledge in the Best Virtual Summit. And well, for all the audience, although Alfredo and I will leave now, and I encourage you to stay because we will have the last keynote. We will travel from Europe to America to meet Ramiro, who is the president of the International Federation of Engineering Education Societies. So guys, stay tuned and see you later. Bye-bye.